So I've been a longtime proponent of individual strengths using Gallup's tool, Strength Finder, Clifton Strengths. But I got curious about the intersection between strengths and emotional intelligence. And as I started looking into that, I found that not much had actually been done with that. No books, no articles, a couple of blog posts that I found. So I started pursuing that topic, looking at how strengths support emotional intelligence and vice versa. And along the way, I had an opportunity to give a presentation as part of the local Dallas-Fort Worth Organizational Development Network. Joel participates in that group as well. And the same evening, there was a series of TED Talks, basically short 5 to 7 minute presentations. That's not even a full TED Talk, but it gives us the opportunity to sample different topics. So I was talking about strengths and emotional intelligence. Joel was talking about resilience and wellness. And afterwards, as we talk to each other, it's like, I think there's a connection here. I think there would be some benefit in working together. So it became this great opportunity for collaboration. I initially invited Joel to write a chapter for the book, but it was clear he had great ideas on other parts, resources to add. And so it became a full co-author collaboration, and great journey together to get to the release of our book on June 15th. And again, we appreciate the opportunity to share some of that work with you here today.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ben. And Joel, jump in, kind of talk a little bit about what you brought to this the book, and a little bit of the excerpts of where you guys were able to facilitate together.
Yeah, and this is a conversation, right? So Chuck, exactly. You know my voice. Anybody here can chime in at any time. Is that what this is about?
Prefer you to raise your hand a little bit, but yes, absolutely.
So, you know, 50 years ago, I was involved with the, anyone ever hear of the Erhard Seminars Training, EST? Anyone ever hear of EST?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
The trainers would always say, you cannot go through life with your hand on the rear view mirror. You had to take hold of the steering wheel, right? That was a metaphor. And you can't also stop the car every 10 feet and get out to see there's nothing in front of you need to be worried about, right? So since that time, there's been all this research on strengths, not just the Clifton strengths, but the VIA, the character strengths, Peters and Seligman's book. I mean, it's just amazing how much has been generated in the research literature. There's been all this research on emotional intelligence. Blows you away how much is out there. And of course, even though people don't know what they're talking about, there's a lot of research on resilience. So it's like, okay, how come these people aren't talking to each other, right? And one of the things that this is about is, it's not about the rear view mirror or the steering wheel, right? And trying to get someplace. It's really just about being where you are. When you look at it all, it's just about being where you are in the strengths that you have. And in today's world, everybody's focused on the rear view mirror or the front of the car, right? Think about everybody's focus right now. So what we're doing is trying to bring these tools that are so in depth together for the purpose of helping people get in touch with their strengths, their emotional intelligence, and their resilience, because they all work together and support each other.
Yeah, I think that's the real story of the book, is that we tend to get kind of that tunnel vision, right? We get very deep in one subject and tend to think that that's the answer to everything. And I think the value of this collaboration has been kind of cutting across different areas. And some interesting conversations along the way from people who didn't necessarily see the connection. But I think we've demonstrated that there's value, that strengths support emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence can be kind of the guide to make sure that strengths aren't being overused, misapplied, or used incorrectly. And all of that contributes towards our resilience in working towards our long-term goals.
Yeah, if anything, there may be people here who are like all about strengths or all about emotional intelligence or all about resilience. Well, at the very least, we hope that you cross-pollinate, right? That you don't get too stuck in the myopic of a particular philosophy.
So Joel, is this Ben, you want to start off with our first poll question?
Yeah, it'd be good to know who's here. Yeah, it'd be great.
Well, that would be helpful.
I've put the poll question out, and I will read it real quick. And again, you can kind of see the poll question here. But do you have formal training? And you can pick from more than one of those. And Ben and Joel, I'm very happy to allow my unapologetic plug here. But one of the things that we're most excited about is for the National Wellness Conference this year on July 28th and 29th, we both have an Indianapolis in-person event as well as virtual. But one of our keynote speakers is actually the grandson of Don Clifton of Clifton Strength Finders, John Clifton. And John will be speaking a lot about the global struggling that we face in our society today. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to really build on this. And not surprising, Joel, wellness coaching is one of our largest predictors here.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
From a wellness group.
Well, I've thought for a long time that Gallup had opportunity to better integrate the work that they've done on engagement on the one hand and looking at people's strengths, and this other work that was on wellness. And I'm so glad to see that coming together with a lot of their current offerings and what people are writing and putting out there.
Without a doubt, Ben, and it's really going to be much more interesting because, back in January, we had Ryan Wolf from Gallup on this Reimagining Wellness live conversation, kind of talking about a lot of the stuff that they're doing from the workplace perspective. And what's interesting is they are really bringing in the Strength Finders side of the conversation much more so than some of the well-being assessments. In fact, they've really even stopped the well-being index just because it's not being funded at this moment. So they're definitely incorporating the Strength Finders pieces much more into it. And in fact, their book, Well-Being at Work, that just came out with Jim Harder and Jim Clifton, which is, of course, John's dad, really kind of puts that, accentuates that Strength Finders piece in there.
That's fascinating that in the age of post or continued COVID, that they're not doing the well-being. That's sort of fascinating.
You know what? It's a tough one for them to do. It costs them about $3 to $4 million a year to actually do that program. So it's very tough. So, all right, can everybody see the shared results here? And if not, I'm going to read them. I'm telling you, I'm having a little bit of freezing here and back and forth, but I can hear it just fine.
Well, Chuck, before you do, anybody who's like across different domains, we'd love to know that too. If you're working in wellness and another area, let us know in the, I think they need you to see the poll again. I'm getting a note here. Please show poll answers again.
Oh, see, I still have it up.
Yeah, I see it. So, but if anybody wants to put it in the chat box, yeah, I work in strengths, emotional intelligence, and anybody who's doing cross-disciplinary work, we'd love to know that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can kind of put that in the piece. But yeah, we've had a few folks that said, every single one of these areas is my happy place, I think was one of the things I love. And that always makes everybody happy. So, all right, I'm going to stop sharing those results. So talk to me and Ben or Joel, either one, talk to me about, what does this help you in looking at as far as, having these folks that are kind of multidisciplined and multi-educated. What are we really looking at? And what do you think that the book can really help this group really identify and understand how to kind of take action.
Yeah, there's the book. Yeah, I think the value is in, again, multiple perspectives, because what we found as we delved into this is that the Clifton Strengths, for example, was developed around peak experiences of people across a variety of job roles, organizations, industries, but it's a personality-based tool. If you look at their technical manual, the 4 domains of strength that Gallup talks about, which is strategic thinking, executing, relationship building, and influencing, it correlates with measures of personality. And my background's industrial psychology, so we always talk about the big 5, right? The big 5 factors of personality. Well, it turns out that those 4 domains hit 4 of the big 5. And the missing dimension is emotional stability. Because you think about instances of peak experience, people are working under kind of optimal conditions. Certainly some people respond to a challenge. They need the roadblocks and obstacles in their way. But for the most part, when we're working at our best, when we're in the zone, we're probably in a pretty good state emotionally. So what happens to strengths when we're not in that great emotional state, when we have, I don't know, uncertainty around us, or a global pandemic, or the economic ripples that come from that? I don't know about others, but I felt a little bit off center, not able to apply my strengths as well as I might on the typical day. And so, we saw that gap there. Joel also mentioned the VIA, the values in action, character strengths. And the originators of that said that there's not really a virtue, a factor that hits on this dimension of emotional stability. So that really reinforced the idea that these are complementary concepts that could go hand in hand.
Yeah, that's sort of a core piece. Go ahead.
No, please finish. I was just going to ask a question.
Just that strength, if only focusing on strengths is somewhat biased and in a way over aspirational. And it's interesting, it's just a blind spot. And so the truth is, in all the work we've done with leaders, a core part of leadership development work is knowing how to deal with crises and failures. And it's not just resilience, but knowing how to navigate conflict, right? And so that's where the emotional intelligence piece comes in, and also where the resilience things come in. So you have to have a mosaic approach.
Well, that's very true when you talk about the skills within emotional intelligence and the practices that contribute to resilience. There are both individual strategies as well as interpersonal or social strategies that are important there.
So, and again, I think Ben and Joel, you'll appreciate the fact that my number one strength is activator. So this question probably makes a lot of sense to you guys. How do we move forward? How do we take this book and put it into action?
Well, you have to purchase it first.
You're welcome.
I mean, thank you. I think everyone here, that poll was really important because everyone here, and assuming given the response rate, has a leg in some area, right? So the first thing is to start learning about another area if you haven't done the work, right? That's the first thing, is to become cognizant. And, my colleague Judy Neal calls it being an edge walker, right? Where you're walking between the edge of these different areas. Resilience is, of course, our work. We do the training with NWI, and that folds into mental health. So to the activator part, if you're at all paying attention to what's happening in the world, you're going to want to do something about mental health, right? Well, people might not want to do it through resilience because even that has stigma. So then go the strength route, but then weave in, right, the other pieces. So the book allows you to crosswalk if you're having difficulty with doing the work in mental well-being, which, you know, I can't say enough is sorely needed. So that I don't know if that answers the question, but that's one way, is to start to know how to turn the conversation so that you can get to the needs that need to be addressed.
Ben, do you want to take a little more, or do you think that got it?
Well, I was just going to say, you know, my background is mostly leadership development. First in the military as a behavioral scientist in the Air Force, then in business as a consultant and trainer, and now with my own coaching and training practice. And from a leadership development standpoint, like I teach at the University of Dallas in the business school. In our course on leadership, we spend, out of a 12-week term, we spend 5 of those sessions talking about emotional intelligence. And the way we tee that up is that people are most often hired for cognitive intelligence, their technical skills and knowledge, but more often than not, they're fired because of issues of emotional intelligence or perhaps moral intelligence. So those are the issues that tend to get people in trouble. And it's so interesting to see, because we ask students to give a definition of leadership when they start the course and then when they end. And almost invariably, the definition at the end is so much broader and richer. And people talk about the fact that they've seen that leadership is indeed a multifaceted thing. It's not about just accomplishing goals and getting tasks done. It's about how you relate to people, supporting them in their growth and development. And so from that standpoint, all these things really work together well, I think. We do a lot of assessments in our class. Like a lot of people here, probably, I consider myself an assessment junkie. I love all these different assessments. And so that's an important next step. We have several short assessments in the book where people can do at least an initial gauge on strengths, emotional intelligence, and resilience, looking at how those things overlay and correlate with each other, but also how they support and develop one another.
I love that, because again, I think there's not enough of this conversation around the leadership side of business, or the leadership side of communities, the leadership side of our governments, in really understanding, like you said, that emotional intelligence side of things. It kind of draws back to, and again, I'm going to share my screen real quick. It really draws back to, some of the things that we've been talking about, even within the National Wellness Institute and our wellness competency model, thinking about those domains, that authenticity and self-awareness, the whole person and systems approach, being inclusive and responsive, communication and connection. I mean, we don't do enough communication properly. And then, like we were talking about, even that legal and ethical side of that conversation. So we've got to make sure that we're thinking about it from all those facets. And in order to do that, we've got to really understand what are those elements and how do we make sure that aspect of multi-dimensions really takes into play of what's going on. So, to me, that's really a lot of that conversation, Ben, that you were just talking about. And it's great to know that, as we can always talk about leadership and what we're looking at from even a promotion or from competencies within the wellness field, really do interact and interchange and align very well.
Yeah, in fact, we talk about competencies in the book, right? And anyone who's with National Wellness and is a certified wellness practitioner, those competencies are about your own leadership, right? So if you're a professional in this field, you also have to think about your own leadership development. And it's interesting, just this morning, we have a healthcare client, and one of the things we do is culture surveys and such. And we ask the employees to say, what are the things that you most want? And, there's resilience is in there, leadership is in there, self-care is in there. And more what we're seeing now, especially with COVID, is they want their leaders to do self-care. They want their leaders to be more sensitive and have more understanding and compassion and empathy. And so that's another part of this, because one of the core features of resilience that we talk about over and over again is compassion. And so to go back to the point, because I know the competencies, Chuck, and compassion and empathy and perspective taking is a core competency in this profession. So you, as a wellness professional, the more that you practice that, the more that you're bringing not just emotional intelligence and resilience, but also strengths. And in fact, empathy is one of the strengths in the Clifton model,
Yes.
along with other, pieces. So that's something that we need to really focus on.
Absolutely. And again, is this now a good time to do the second poll question?
Probably, yeah.
Let's just do that. Let me open it up here. All right, we have launched it. As you can see, it's just, you get to pick one on this one. So just giving everybody a little heads up, this is a one only kind of comment.
Right.
And also, just so everybody is also aware, National Wellness Institute just finished up in 2020 the update and clarification of our wellness competency model that Joel was actually one of the original authors of these wellness promotion competency models, and can't thank him enough for all the work that you've done, Joel, for doing that and getting it moving forward. So very excited about what's going on there. So right now we're neck and neck right now as far as building personal and team resilience and training on emotional intelligence, Joel. So that's good. Building character strengths is not that far behind, but it's definitely pushing there.
Like
I'm going
a
to give
horse
you guys
race.
about another 10 or 15 seconds here.
It's like a horse race, Chuck.
It really is. It's kind of fun to watch.
I was thinking more like chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry.
Yeah. Okay. 5,
Use your
4,
metaphor.
3, 2, 1. Boom. Okay. We just shut her down. I'm going to share the results for you. And as you guys can see, literally it was a 2-horse race in a lot of ways, but it was not that far of apart, the 63 to 65. So
Sounds like we ought to talk a little more about strengths. I don't know.
I think you're right.
Well,
but the great thing is, Ben, when we talk about personal and team resilience and we talk about emotional intelligence, we're talking about strengths in so many ways.
Absolutely. And while I emphasize the fact that there was a gap in the strengths and not including emotional stability, what we also see is that individual strengths contribute to the development of emotional intelligence and resilience in very specific ways. So without going into too great a detail, just at that domain level, you think about strategic thinking skills often give people the ability for good self-reflection, to understand emotions they may be feeling, to assess their skills and so on. The executing domain, which is strengths like achiever, people probably have pretty good self-management, even if they don't currently have great emotional awareness. They're able to kind of power their way through. And so those executing skills can be applied in the self-management area. Likewise, relationship building contributes to the social awareness, being empathetic to others, being aware of what's going on there, and the influencing strengths, things like communication and woo and maximizer and activator. Those are great from the standpoint of what we call relationship management. How you don't manage emotions of others, but you manage emotion in the context of relationships and interactions. And those are the classic influencing skills. So
without a doubt.
We call that the person's cornerstone in emotional intelligence.
Yep. So Ben and Joel, I'm going to kind of throw a little bit of a thought to you here and kind of, really want to get your perspective on this. A few weeks ago, National Wellness Institute conducted a poll out on LinkedIn. And basically, we asked the question, how comfortable are you getting back to society, back to work, back to society, and so forth? And what is that comfort level? And what was really interesting was, even just 2 or 3 weeks ago, 35% of those folks who actually took the survey still said they have a very uncomfortable feeling about being back out in society, being back out in public. Talk about two things here. Number one, how do we help those folks kind of adapt back into society? And number two, how do we help both those folks and the folks that have adapted back into society still function and work together so that we don't, I'll say it this way, we don't shame those who are still uncomfortable coming out into the area, and vice versa. We're not shaming those who've chosen to move out and move into society, but start working as a emotionally intelligent organization and an emotionally intelligent group of human beings.
Well, it's a great window of opportunity, and one I hope we don't miss, because it's very easy after a crisis to just say, "Oh, we're back. Come back to the office. Everything will be fine." And we miss the fact that that's as important, if not more important, of a transition than it was when we had to leave the office and lock down and figure out how to work at home. It's going to be challenging for people to come back in that environment. And so for the work that many of you here do, it's such an opportune time to say, let's be very conscious and intentional about it.
Yeah, there's so much here. I'd love to hear what everybody has to say, but it kind of goes back to that first metaphor I gave about not driving through life with your hands on the rear view mirror, right? And to come back to being where you are and getting out of this, what if, or it could go back, or all these different conceptions. And so what we've done in the book is we've listed 50 tips for uncertain times. And each tip, and we're planning on rolling it out in Instagram. Each tip is really designed to help people think in a micro way about this on a daily basis. That if you take too big of a perspective here or too big of a strategy, it's more like, like they say in the 12-step programs, one day at a time. And so what we're trying to do is get people to just focus on today, right? And, and if anybody wants to put in a number from 1 to 50 in the chat box, first one in, I will read the tip associated. The first one gets it. Write a number 1 to 50. What is it? 25. Okay, 25. Here, interesting. Examine your values. What are the beliefs you live by, such as responsibility and equity, and the end states you work to achieve? Wisdom, love, happiness. Write down your top 5 to 7 values. Assess how well you're living those values and how you spend your time and your money. So that, that's a very simple exercise that we advocate people do together, socially, right? Social media. And gradually, while people do these things together, it starts to break down some of that uncertainty and anxiety and comes back to, wholeness, Chuck, not wellness, wholeness and common humanity. Sorry, I had to say wholeness and common humanity. Can I get some fist bumps for wholeness and common humanity here?
Let's see here. I'm going to give you a celebrate because I couldn't find my fist bump fast enough.
So yeah, your values. So that's just one tip, but that's the thing is there's so much out there. We get overwhelmed. Just take it one day at a time, do things together, be nice on social media.
Okay, Joel, you got to read another one. 45.
Oh no, we're going to be here all day. Okay.
Chris was first in, so we have to give that one.
Ah, okay.
It just they threw him in there so fast you missed the very first one.
Well, I'm also a little under the weather, so our resilience model, I need to explain this first, has 5 C's, right? There's confidence, commitment, community, centering, and compassion. It's so tip 45, spend time with other 5C people. Identify which of the 5 C's needs development in you and seek out others who are making up for what you lack. So if you're not good at centering, right, which is something, even though I act like I'm centered, I can fly off the handle any moment here. Anybody says anything wrong. So I need to spend some time with people who are good at centering, right? Or if someone's really good at community and I don't want to be part of community, it might be good for me to get out more, right? So this tip is about seek out others whom you feel are good in that area and just spend time talking to them about how they have developed that in themselves. Really listen, really listen. For example, how did you get so good at staying calm in a crisis? Or what makes you keep focused and persevering even when there are so many obstacles? So that's centering and commitment. So again, it's about the social, right? And the whole idea is how can we get together in a positive, aspirational way and draw on our wholeness and common humanity?
More fist bumps, everybody.
I think these are the kinds of discussions that teams need to be having as they come back to the office or back to whatever the new hybrid world might look like. For too long in too many organizations, the message explicitly or implicitly at least has been check your emotions at the door. We don't deal with that here, just focus on the work. And I think if COVID showed us anything, it was that's not tenable when people are in lockdown and they're trying to work from home and they're homeschooling and all these things are going on. A lot of leaders have had to engage in that level that they never did before. So hopefully that's one of the things we bring back with us is an awareness that that's important as a leader to be in tune with the emotional climate of your team and what people are going through individually and collectively.
By the way, Tracy Oles did a great job of capturing your 5 C's, Joel. In fact, I think Tracy did a better job because Tracy came up with the term Compassino instead of compassion, out of surely missing the wrong way of typing. But I'm going to use that now. Compassino.
Sounds like compassion with a cup of coffee.
Exactly.
I like that.
This is like the Starbucks compassion.
You first heard it here.
Brilliant, Tracy. I was laughing because I'm like, oh my God, that's one of those spelling brilliance that I sometimes occasionally get into, but I usually don't do them with something that sounded really better than the original word.
So are there questions or comments that people have that we want to, how does that work?
Throw them in the chat. That way we don't get into too much of over talk on a bunch of stuff. And we're watching them right there. Trademarked.
Yeah, you can say a comment, a question, a poignant aphorism. Those are always welcome. Your favorite resilience song, your favorite flower.
The real question is how many people just went out to Google and was actually trying to find the definition of of what you just said, Joel.
Poignant aphorism.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'll put a poignant aphorism.
There you go. Tracy says she's serving Compassino with almond milk.
Tracy, who are you? Where are you?
I love it. We've just made Tracy a star. That's all I got to say.
Tracy, you have to speak up now. You can't just hide in the.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself, Tracy, and in fact, you got to turn your video on because I'm right here.
You can't just like lob things out there without full engagement. No.
Anna's asking if Tracy should get a free book now.
Oh yeah, there you go. Definitely, Tracy. Send me your address. Just me. Don't put it to everyone. Questions, comments, come on. There's some great people here. I know you people.
There are some brilliant people sitting in this group right now. I can tell you that's for sure.
Hi, Vicky Parsons.
Ooh, starting to call him out. Call people out now. So I'll tell you, one of the last things that I guess we can maybe talk a little bit about is really looking at this perspective again as we start to move into 2022 now. We're doing a lot of talk right now, and we should be, about returning to society, returning to work, What's that going to look like? Who's going to be the ones that are going to be leading the efforts? What are we going to be thinking about now that we are? Let me rephrase that. What are we not thinking about today that we should be and hopefully will be come 2022? Ben, throw a big one at you.
Great question. And I think, again, it's my top of mind thought on that is this transition back to the new normal, if there ever is normal again. It's giving conscious, intentional thought to doing things differently in the workplace. And, I think in many ways we realize we can't go back to where we were before. People have gotten that taste of working from home in many cases, and companies are saying we're going to continue that at some level. There's kind of this bidding war right now among some of the tech companies to say, how many days are they going to allow people to work from home, and how much flexibility do you have in that? And that's a good thing, I think, that we've got organizations that have said for years, oh, we just can't do it. And then we had to do it. And so what part of that do we need to take with us as we move forward? So I think that's a key part for 2022. It's almost the opportunity to redesign our organizations and to some extent the culture of our organizations based on the lessons of the past year and a half.
Joel, there's some good questions finally coming in, so I'm going to throw one at you here. How do you model resilience for others who look to you as a role model?
Well, we've done research and have worked with a number of clients in this area, and what comes up over and over and over again is authenticity. There's no substitute for that, and it's that, to kind of combine the comment that Ben made, instead of acting like, oh, we're going to get through this, it's being honest about where we are. It's being willing to say we don't have all the answers, right? And I'm going to make a distinction between that and just being vulnerable, right? It's not the same thing, because there's strength in the authenticity. But this is where the emotional intelligence comes in. Ben's genius in the book is that emotional intelligence, when you're really practicing across the 4 areas of self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and so forth, allows you to either dial up a strength or dial down a strength. So you just don't always go on your strength all the time, right? So an authentic person, I don't like using that phrase, but someone who's in touch with authenticity knows, this is a place where it doesn't pay for me to dial up my strength. I need to dial down and be honest with myself. So I think, I hope that answers the question.
It did really well, but it also made me laugh because I just saw a wonderful meme last week that said, be authentic, unless you're authentically mean or authentically boring. And that made me laugh when I saw it, because it's like, that kind of hits the spot pretty good. So appreciated that. Victoria had a great question here. I work in higher ed, and young adults struggle with all of these areas. And I can tell you, as the father of a recently finished up freshman in college, this is definitely a huge case, especially in this last year. Confidence building is not great with this generation. How do we make that a big part of our, I'll say it this way, our future our future growth? Ben, I'm going to let you start.
Well, I think when we talk about confidence, we tend to think of that as an individual trait. And what I love about Joel's work on resilience with the 5 C's, as well as when we have a full understanding of emotional intelligence, is there's such a strong social component to that. And I think for students coming back to campus, it's important for them to have that that social connection. We've certainly missed that in the virtual world. And so coming back and creating opportunities for people to connect, I really believe the best application of strengths is not just individual knowledge, but it's working in a team context where you see that others have complementary strengths and we can support one another. So looking for opportunities to create that, because it makes a place for everyone, that everyone has something to contribute as part of a team. And we need to recognize and celebrate those differences.
Yeah, I need to chime in on this because we originally developed the team resilience model with emerging adults, right? We, some of you might know, we were partnering with TGI Fridays, and we did about 400 hours of interviews with 16 to 25-year-olds. And they're the ones who told us about the 5 C's. Because in the restaurant environment, if you don't know, young adults working in the restaurant environment is your highest risk occupation for everything. If any of you have ever worked in a restaurant at that age. The team aspect was what came out as critical. And that ended up, we did a clinical trial and that was effective. But the point of it was, a quick exercise you can do on campus is sit the team or students or whoever in a circle and ask them, think about your best buddy on campus, or think about your best classmate, or think about your best coworker, and list out the qualities that they have. What are the adjectives that describe them? And then when you look at the trait list, they will overlap with the 5 C's. And that's where you help the young adult who's struggling already with a number of risk factors to come back to that social support, community, compassion part, and get them away from it all has to be mental toughness and grit. I think if anything, COVID might be helping us to understand that resilience isn't just about mental toughness and grit.
Without a doubt. And it was interesting. In fact, I just put up a link earlier this morning from PBS, and they were doing they did a article and documentary on a couple of young kids with type 1 diabetes who have been really struggled in the quarantine side of this, as well as their caregivers. I urge you to go click on that video and watch it, because it's very compelling. And it was interesting because, we're part of the Diabetes Alliance Network here within the National Wellness Institute. So, I definitely was reaching out to that whole group and really trying to understand, what can we do to kind of make some of those things happen. And by the way, I did post it on LinkedIn. Lana was asking real quick. So it is on LinkedIn on the National Wellness Institute page. But what I find really interesting about that whole scenario is really thinking about it just from another perspective. Those are folks that are very, they were already kind of quarantined and lonely just because they're literally taking insulin shots. But because of even being home even that much more and not being able to get out and really making those that connection happen, they found themselves even with more health risks and more concerns and future issues. So we've definitely got a huge space that we've got to be into, and we're all about watching the science and making sure that the sciences are going, but we've also got to make sure we're looking at the social science and the economic science, as well as the health science, and putting them all together and really understanding the whole mental aspect of what we're dealing with. Ben, Joel, what do you think?
Ben, I'll let you go. There's a lot in there.
There's a lot in there. I'm not sure where to start. Sorry, I was actually thinking about another question in the chat. You mind if I answer that, and then I'll come back to your question?
Yeah, go right ahead. No, please do.
I saw one from Kim about how we incorporate the lessons of neuroscience in leadership development, and I'd like to say something really profound about that. But the one that comes to mind is, there's so many things that have been kind of long time wisdom that are being now now we understand the science behind it with neuroscience studies. So like the old advice, I'll go to something very simple in self-management. We tell people, if you're angry or feeling that rush of being upset, count to 10 before you say anything. Well, the neuroscience research says when we hit that fight or flight response and get that rush of adrenaline and other chemicals in the brain, it takes the brain about 6 seconds to reabsorb those chemicals so you can respond on a more rational basis. And so the old advice of count to 10, even if you count fast to 10, probably going to be about 6 seconds. And so there's some wisdom there, I think. And so we do look at what those lessons are, what does our knowledge of the brain today tell us, and just this whole area of neuroplasticity is amazing. It supports the idea that we talk about in the book of having a growth mindset. Yes, we want to be aware of our traits and characteristics and tendencies, but we're not a set of fixed assets, right? We have the capacity to grow and develop and change. And I think at least that last part maybe takes a glancing blow at your question, Chuck. I don't know.
I did a good job as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
All right. Final thoughts, Joel and Ben.
Well, I'm just real excited that everyone's here. And I want to maybe summarize a couple of points that you are able to build your own competencies as a wellness professional, right? And that you are a leader. And that as a leader, the tools that we're talking about here, whether you use our book or not, are very important. Knowing your strengths, knowing the strengths of those who are on your team, knowing how to complement the 5 C's, right? Who's demonstrating resilience in the way that they do and acknowledging that. And then doing your own emotional work, right? Those are going to be important no matter what. And so combined with the national wellness competencies, you have a real potential map for ongoing development because it's never going to end. I think the other thing is I keep going back to that metaphor because we spend so much time trying to get somewhere. And if we could just sit together in the car and talk more with each other and listen more with each other and help each other bring out each other's strengths, we're going to be so much better off as a society. We just rush around too much and it's not healthy. And having done so much research with wellness professionals and champions, I will see the number one thing that people say that keeps them from doing their programs is they're not given the time to do it, or they don't have the time to do it. And I want to tell you that when you do this work, when you deepen into the being of your strengths, when you deepen into the being of your resilience, time just grows. You get more time. Mm-hmm. And you've got to get off and get other people off the freaking treadmill because that's what's happening. Third thing, you asked earlier, Chuck, about 2023, and you didn't call on me. You only called on Ben, and I hate you. But I'm going to give you a chance now to transition is that everybody's going through this transition. But the counterpoint to that is agility, or what the chronobiologists call rhythm entrainment, which is learning how to get back in rhythm with each other. And that's going to be the most important thing, is how do we create environmental systems, microenvironments, group activities that allow us to just get back into routines together, even if it's a bit here and a bit there and a bit there. And nobody's talking about that. And the reason is that you can't manufacture it. You have to get together and talk about what's the schedule like for you? What's the schedule like for me? And we know that rhythm entrainment, if you know about circadian rhythms. And I highly recommend Dan Pink's book, When, is the key to sleep health. And sleep health is the key to everything. And so many people have had their sleep hijacked here. So if there's anything we need to get back to, is to learn how to create mutually enhancing routines that we can work through together and talk about it and talk it through. And I hope that the tools in the book will help with that.
Mhm.
It's about dancing, Vicky. It's about tango.
You know, it's also about breaking bread together. You're right, Joel. I cannot say enough. In fact, had a great conversation with my friend Chef Michel Nishan, and he and I have been really talking about how do we get some of his friends, the world-class chefs that he knows, and start to build out an entire event just all over the United States and just literally bring people together, break bread, and actually have those hard conversations. But I can tell you one thing, guys, there's one place that I would suggest y'all come. That was a good transition, wasn't it, Joel?
Set you up, man.
Thank you for that. I mean, my gosh, I know how to even grab that alley-oop. But, you know, I would love to see everybody in Indianapolis, Indiana. It is limited in numbers that we have in the Indianapolis area, but we will still also have it virtually. So very excited to have this going on board. Ben, very nice to meet you today. Joel, always a pleasure, my friend, and it's always great to hear from you. And I want to say thank you so much to everybody that joined us today, and looking forward to it. Our next one, we are going to be skipping July because we do have the national conference coming up. But on August 26th, we are going to be working with Anita Mawali and Erasmus Lopez Boko on multicultural competency and some of the intentional needs that we have from that perspective. And I can guarantee you, everybody, there's going to be a lot of conversations about resilience, a lot of conversations about what we just spoke about today. So look forward to seeing you in July and also in August.
Good. Thank you, Chuck. And as a Purdue graduate, I encourage people to go to Indiana, go to Indianapolis for the conference. That sounds great.
Boiler up. I am a third generation. My daughter's at Purdue.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for the opportunity today. And, you know, my closing thought would be, as leaders, create space for the dialogue, for the conversation. And so glad to be a part of this today. I want to be sure to get the chat. I want to connect with everyone here. I'd love to have a conversation with each of you, but especially the people who like chocolate.
Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.